হ্যালো, হ্যালো, হ্যালো। গুড ইভিনিং। আচ্ছা, আচ্ছা। মানে শুনতে পাচ্ছেন না? ওকে, ওকে। তুমি ভালো আছো তো? আচ্ছা। আমি এখন মিউটে রাখছি। Okay.
Am I audible and visible? Good evening.
গুড ইভিনিং ম্যাডাম।
Good evening.
আমি জয়শ্রী বলছি।
ও আচ্ছা আচ্ছা জয়শ্রী। স্পিকার কি যোগ দিয়েছেন? তাহলে কি আমরা শুরু করতে পারি এখন?
আমি যোগ দিয়েছি। আমার কথা কি কেউ শুনতে পাচ্ছেন?
হ্যাঁ হ্যাঁ শোনা যাচ্ছে।
হ্যাঁ। আচ্ছা, আমার লাইন চলে গেছিল, এখন কি শোনা যাচ্ছে আমার?
হ্যাঁ, আপনি অডিবল শোনা যাচ্ছে।
হ্যাঁ আমরা শুনতে পাচ্ছি।
আচ্ছা
আমরা শুনতে পাচ্ছি। আমি জয়শ্রী মুখোপাধ্যায় বলছি।
আচ্ছা আচ্ছা আচ্ছা।
আমি শুনতে আমারটা শোনা যাচ্ছে তো?
হ্যাঁ হ্যাঁ
হ্যাঁ,
হ্যাঁ।
আচ্ছা, থ্যাংক ইউ।
A very good evening to all. On behalf of the Department of History, Lady Brabourne College, I welcome you to this national webinar entitled Crafting Contemporary History, How to Breach the Great Methodological Wall of 1947. It gives me immense pleasure to welcome our speaker, the very renowned young scholar, Dr. Ritujjoti Bandhopadhyay, who teaches at Aizar, Mohali. Just a little housekeeping before we get started. If you have any questions, please give it in the chat box. The speaker will take them up after the presentation. And please keep your microphones in mute mode and disable your videos during the proceedings. I would now request our principal madam, Professor Shuli Sharkar, who has always been a source of encouragement and pillar of support in all our academic endeavors and otherwise, to please give the welcome address.
Thank you, Kakuli. Respected speaker, Dr. Bandhopadhyay, respected organizers, that is the Department of History of Lady Brabourne College, headed by Dr. Shubhalakshmi Pandey, respected participants, and our very beloved students. A good afternoon to all of you. It's a wonderful occasion when the Department of History organizes a webinar, national webinar, on the topic crafting contemporary history, how to bridge the great methodological wall of 1947. A difficult topic, no doubt about it. And at the very outset, I must say that history is not at all my cup of tea. I have a deep interest in history though. Apparently, 1947 is a glorious year for India as the nation had achieved independence in that year. But the question which appears to be crucial is Indian independence exclusively associated with 1947? The process of independence had started long before. For example, as a result of the Government of India Act 1935, a large measure of autonomy was granted to the provinces of British India, ending the system of diarchy that was introduced by the Government of India Act 1990. 1935 Act also provided for the establishment of a Federation of India to be made up of both British India and some or all of the princely states. Since 1935, direct elections increasing the franchise from 7 million to 35 million people were introduced in our country. These and various other features of the Government of India Act 1935 showed the marks of autonomy, if not independence, of our nation. Again, the question which haunts us is, can India be truly identified as an independent nation even after 1947? 73 long years passed after we had achieved our freedom. It is high time we introspected on how free we truly are. We are free from British colonial rule, true, but regarding a number of other issues like poverty, unemployment, illiteracy, health and hygiene, gender inequality, we are not at all free from the clutches of these deadly curses. We still have to get past the hurdles that indeed hold back India from achieving freedom in its truest sense. At the same time, we have also to think over seriously regarding the fact that post-independence issues have not yet been that widely and deeply studied by historians as they have been studied and sought to be explained by researchers of liberal arts and social sciences. Partition, for example, is a widely discussed post-independence issue in our country. But centering around the partition, we find innumerable literary pieces. Similarly, economists, sociologists, psychologists, political scientists, geographers, all have made attempts to systematically investigate into the various aspects of this issue. Historians are rather silent on post-independence social developments. 73 long years have already been passed after Indian independence, I am repeating. If historians have to abide by their disciplinary taboo of dealing with issues of the past only, ignoring the contemporary one, even then it is high time they considered issues of post-1947 period as past issues, and hence did research on such issues. Isn't an account covering a time span of 73 long years not a sufficiently past account? No, I will have to stop now. After all, I have mentioned that history is not my cup of tea, and I am not going to waste much time by lingering my speech anymore. We have the ablest person who can give us some answers to this question, who will definitely show us some new light regarding this issue. And I'm pretty certain that lots and lots of questions will be asked after Dr. Bandyopadhyay's speech is over, and lots of their probable answers too are to be provided by Dr. Bandyopadhyay. And at the end of the webinar, I'm pretty certain that everybody will be able to know a lot more new things and a lot more new ways of explaining them. Everybody will feel more and more enriched and more enlightened. I wish this one-day webinar a grand success. Thank you.
Thank you, Shulidi. That has set the tone of today's webinar. I would now request our head of the department, Dr. Shubholakshi Pandey, to introduce our speaker.
Good evening, everybody. I have the privilege today to introduce our speaker, Dr. Ritujyoti Bandyopadhyay, who is an assistant professor in history, Department of Humanities and Social Sciences at the Indian Institute of Science, Education and Research, Muhat. He did his MA and PhD from Jadavpur University, Kolkata. Part of his PhD work was also carried out in the University of California, Berkeley. Initially, he taught as an assistant professor at the Center for Studies in Social Sciences, Kolkata. Before that, he was a postdoctoral fellow and lecturer, State and Democracy Research Group in Center for Modern India Studies at the University of Göttingen. A postdoctoral associate in the Urban Research and Policy Program at NIAS, Bangalore. Currently, he is a member of Critics and Renewals of Democracy module at the International Center of Advanced Studies in Humanities and Social Sciences, New Delhi. His research projects explore themes in informality, infrastructure technologies, urban history, and governmentality studies in late colonial and post-colonial India. Among his numerous publications, I'm just mentioning a few. In 2011, he wrote Origins of Archiving, Authors and Pavement Dwellers in Calcutta, which was published in Dialectical Anthropology. In 2011, the same year, another article of him, A Historian Among Anthropologists, comments on politics of archiving in Dialectical Anthropology. 2012, he wrote, In the Shadow of the Shopping Mall, Hawkers in Global Calcutta, which was published in Economic Globalization from Below, New York. In 2013, the Political Economy of India's Unique Identification Project, in Atit Ghosh edited book, branding the migrant arguments of rights, welfare, and security. In 2015, the Street Vendors Act and Pedestrianism in India, a reading of the politics of the Calcutta Hawker Sangram Committee in Christina Graff and Noah Ha edited Street Vending in the Neoliberal City, a global perspective on the practices and politics of a marginalized economy, New York. In 2016, Institutionalizing Informality, the Hawker's Question in Post-Colonial Calcutta, published in Modern Asian Studies. In 2017, he wrote jointly with Professor Ranubir Somadar, Caste and the Frontiers of Post-Colonial Accumulation. In the book, Accumulation in Post-Colonial Capitalism, published by Springer and edited by Imon Mitro, Ranubir Somadar, and Shomita Sen. In 2020, he wrote an article, Why Do Empty Streets Threaten Democracy? In Antipode. And his quote, Streets in Motion, Property, Police, and Political Culture in 20th Century Calcutta, quote, is going to be published by the Cambridge University Press. I just mentioned a few among his many writings. And today, Dr. Bandyopadhyay will speak on methodological problems on the partition. And let us hear from him now. Over to you, Dr. Bandyopadhyay.
Thank you. So, am I visible and audible? I hope so. Thank you, Professor Sarkar and Professor Pandey and others for giving me this opportunity to present before you some of my thoughts about the craft of...
Sorry to disturb you.
Hello?
If I could disturb you, Dr. Bandyopadhyay,
Yes,
your
yes.
video, there's a problem with that. We can't see you.
Oh my God. Video is... Just a moment. Can you see me now? Can you see me now? Hello? Not at all. Now you can see me, right?
Yes,
Okay.
thank you.
So let me start. Now I can see myself, so it's very comforting now. So thank you all for very generous introduction, and also to Professor Sarkar, who almost introduced my topic very elegantly. So without much further ado, I start the talk. I will take about, say, 55 minutes to cover it. And if you have questions, please feel free to ask this. So I start. So in this presentation, I discuss some of the major challenges of writing contemporary history in the South Asian context. I then propose a way to address these challenges as well. I claim that the relationship between history and archives underwent a profound transformation in the post-colonial period. A historian of the contemporary or the present must reflect on this transformation in her craft. This is the claim. Hence, I claim that contemporary history is more than a mere extension of modern history. So contemporary history is more than the extension of modern history. So a modern Indian historian might encounter certain troubles in dealing with the methodological problems surrounding contemporary history. Much of what I'm going to say is a product of a very long conversation over almost 1.5 decades with Professor Shomita Sen, who supervised my PhD until the end of it. So I start. So what is, let me start with a very beginner's question. What is contemporary history? Like what is history? E.H. Carr's What is History? So what is contemporary history? In 1964, Geoffrey Barraclough brought out a volume titled An Introduction to Contemporary History. This book was the first attempt to canonize contemporary history as a specific area within the larger field of history. In this volume, Barraclough declared, and I quote him, contemporary history begins when the problems which are actual in the world today first take visible shape. This is a very profound sentence, I believe. So I repeat, contemporary history begins when the problem which are actual in the world today first take visible shape. Any canonical work, because this book is canonizing contemporary history, so I'm calling it a canonical work. Any canonical work is bound to be a categorical exercise in the sense that it has to, or it must specify and limit our understandings of the issue it seeks to canonize. Taken thoughtfully, it involves a cultural analytic that refers to the epistemological and political commitments that are involved in selecting what the historian sees as contemporary and what she leaves out. The problem here is that every moment is bound to be contemporary and simultaneously singular and unique. In contemporary history, any engagement with the historical ought to begin with the everyday and the commonsensical, with an explicit emphasis on the appreciation of the contemporary situation, or to put it otherwise, the adverb now. Now is a very powerful adverb. So I am asking you to remember this nowness of the contemporary. Barraclough says the era of contemporary history for Europe began in 1945, after the Great War was over and decolonization in the rest of the world began. The new world order was marked by a consensus that people's consent was the ethical foundation of sovereignty. So that is popular sovereignty. Please remember this term, those who are not very familiar with this term. This will keep on returning in this presentation. The hereditary king, the democratically elected ruler, and the autocrat all agreed to rule in the name of the people. Thus, in the free republic of the mid-20th century, sovereignty leaves the body of the king and finds a new host in the people. You don't necessarily need to be democratic in order to be a popular sovereign. In the South Asian context, 1947, and this is what Professor Sarkar very elegantly pointing out in her introductory remarks. In South Asian context, 1947 acts as the conventional divide between modern history and contemporary history. That year, India won freedom and was partitioned to form two independent nation states, India and Pakistan. Next year, you may well recollect, Sri Lanka became a Dominion republic. In India and Pakistan, independence found its way through communal genocides and the world's biggest refugee crisis that continued till the mid-1970s. It was only in early 2000s, if I'm not wrong, that the Indian universities brought post-colonial India to a normal postgraduate history syllabus. Even when post-colonial India became part of a regular history curriculum, we decided to keep our journey confined and very precise up to 1964. What happened in 1964? This was the year Nehru passed away. Between 1947 and 1964, the courses on post-colonial India typically include the modules such as partition and decolonization, integration of the princely states with the new republic, the making of the constitution through a labyrinth of debates in constituent assembly, the Congress system, Rajini Kotharis, linguistic reorganization of states, the Nehruvian foreign policy, 2 5-year plans and so-called mixed economy, and the reformatting of the caste question within the parameters of the constitution and a newly established democratic political culture. If you have a Marxist teacher in your course, offering the course, then you get to know the mode of production debate in agriculture. And if you have a Gramscian Marxist teacher in the university, then you certainly are allowed to know the dominant class coalition model in the form of Gramsci's famous passive revolution. Other than partition and decolonization, none of the topics would include the works from established historians. Generally, historians of South Asia have tended to take 1947 as a natural temporal boundary of their academic enterprise. This tendency was so pervasive that in 1990s, even in 1990s, that historian Parthasarathi Gupta, who is unfortunately no more with us, he died in the year 2000, I believe, reminded fellow historians from the podium of Indian History Congress that Indian history did not end in 1947. It is only in the recent years a new group of professional historians have begun to study decolonization and India's post-colonial experience as a process. Several new works on early institutional reforms, the constitution and democracy have come up in the last couple of years between 2018 and 2020. These works have analyzed how the Indian state and the masses became intimate in everyday life in the complex interface of democratic institutions and market forces. In this, the opening of new archives of the Election Commission of India, the Planning Commission, and the historians' access to the private papers of significant public figures like Gulzarilal Nanda, Syama Prasad Mukherjee, etc., of the early post-colonial years have played a substantial role. Still, researchers on post-colonial India hit frequent archival closures as the Indian state remained stubbornly sensitive, I call it stubbornly sensitive, to make the government files available to the scholars. Over the years, scholars of contemporary history have learned to diversify their archival experience. In this context, this brings me to my second and the most favorite anecdote. I heard this from 3 historians, Shomita Sen, Lakshmi Subramanian, and Annesha Sengupta. I am presenting a composite version of the same story. Composite version, of course. So my feat of imagination is also involved in it. While working at the WBSA, which is West Bengal State Archives, the historian found a peculiar pattern emerging. She was getting files of even number years, but not of odd number years. And this was consistent. So she asked, a veteran officer, some of you must know him by this slight hint of him, sat her down and explained. After partition, he said, the government agreed to share archives files. But by what principle? Writers' Building did not keep separate files for East and West Bengal. A solution was found. My friend remained very deeply curious about who the author was of this brilliant, completely objective, numerical strategy. Trucks came and loaded files of odd numbers of years and started for Dhaka. When she inquired in Dhaka, these files were not there. and no one knew anything about them. Somewhere between Calcutta and Dhaka are truckloads of Government of India and Bengal files of odd number years, untraced and untraceable. After all, partition happened during the monsoon, the worst season for any logistical movement between two Bengals. Meanwhile, the researcher who wishes to track whatever must guess from piecing together 1922 and 1924 files what may have happened in 1923. I need not say that by an international protocol to which India is a signatory, I'm emphasizing in the first